My stepsister Laura and I were always close. When her dad married my mom, I became her older sister. She was the only girl in her family and was thrilled to finally have sister. She was only little, and I was already heading into my teens, so there was a bit of an age gap, but we made it work. We'd paint each other's nails, do each other's hair, classic big sister and little sister activities. Laura liked to bake with me, and she loved making chocolate cake. I'd let her lick the spoon after we made the frosting. It was nice for me too. I had an older sister, Abby, but she left home early, and I never really saw her. She was sweet whenever she stopped by my mom's place, and we built a decent relationship. However, she had her own family to worry about, so she never stopped long. So Laura was my chance to be the sister Abby never was, or was able to. I felt bad when I moved away for college. I was about 4 hours away from my parents and Laura, which obviously upset her. But I promised her I would come home for the holidays, and I'd give her a ring each week. When I finished college, I decided to stay in the city I was in and take on a job there. I loved it there, and I could afford to live there well enough, so I bought an apartment in the city center. I'd go home at least once a month to see my parents and Laura, just so she wouldn't be lonely as the only kid left in the house. This little ritual would go on until Laura ended up getting a scholarship to one of the other colleges in my city. For accommodation and travel purposes, Laura moved in with me. My parents jokingly told me how much of a handful she was, and that she's your problem now. Laura was over the moon when she moved in. Immediately, she took over the place, delegating herself to the spare bedroom next to mine and filling the bathroom with all her makeup and facial creams. I expected nothing less. I would help her with her studies, cheer her on from the sidelines when she played hockey, and we would watch scary movies together every Sunday. A new ritual we had made for ourselves. The weird behavior began when I stayed out one night with a guy I met on Tinder. He was really nice, and we seriously hit it off. So much so, we're still happily married. I had left Laura that night and promised her that I'd either be back that evening if it was a miss, or the next morning if it was a success. She teased me for it, rightfully so. She told me to break a leg before she went back to watching TV and stuffing her face with chips. I stayed the night at my husband's place, and I even had breakfast with him the next morning. My phone died when I went to bed, so I left it charging overnight on the bedside table. When I woke up and unlocked my phone, I had a couple of missed calls from Laura, nothing out of the ordinary. The texts were regular too, the usual, "So you banged, or what?" and "I guess getting dick is more important than speaking to your sister, huh?" She had also left me a voice message, but it looked like she had deleted it about an hour after she sent it. When I got home, I couldn't find Laura anywhere. I searched all the rooms and called her name, and she never responded. I texted her to let her know I had made it home okay, and I asked her where she was. When I sent that text, I swore I heard a small ding go off in the room next to me. That was her room. I squinted my eyes into the darkness of her bedroom. She had the curtains closed, which wasn't an odd occurrence with her, as she often had them shut. I used to tell her that she was going to turn into a mushroom if she kept squatting in the dark. She told me to shut up and go away. I was about to take a step into Laura's room when I felt a horrible shiver crawl down my spine. It was almost as if my monkey brain activated and told me to stop moving. Some kind of ancient part of my mind warned me of an unseen danger. The fear, however, didn't come from stepping into my sister's room. It came from right behind me. I stood there, my breathing halted and eyes staring straight into the blackness ahead. There was someone behind me, in the bathroom. If this was an intruder, which I thought it was, I had Laura's hockey stick leaned up against her door. Strangely, it was placed as if whoever it was lurking behind me wanted me to use it. I breathed in harshly and quickly reached for the hockey stick with both hands, lifting it up to my chest defensively. I spun around and braced myself for whoever was standing behind me. There was no one there. It was just an empty bathroom facing back at me. While still brandishing Laura's stick, I quietly crept into my room and scanned the area for movement. I checked my closet, under my bed, and beneath my desk. Nothing. So I sneaked out of my room and down the hall, closing both our bedroom doors beforehand. I checked the kitchen and living room. Both were still. Once I had searched in there, I backpedaled into the hallway again and turned to the bathroom door, which was closed. The place was as it usually was, cold and wet with a hint of Dior J'adore in the air. Then my phone pinged. I looked down, and it was Laura. She had texted me, "Turn around." I turned and stuck my head out the door of the bathroom. The hallway was still the same, except our bedroom doors were now wide open and the light was off in the kitchen. I was more weirded out than scared. Whatever prank Laura was trying to pull, it was a shit one. I still held the hockey stick and proceeded to walk gingerly towards the kitchen again. I flicked the light back on and prepared to see my sister jump out at me like the freak she was. Unfortunately, the room was empty. Baffled, I furrowed my brow and turned one last time down the hallway. Laura was irritating me now, so I stomped into her room and yelled, "Pack it in, Laura." I switched on her bedroom light and looked around the space, searching for her. She wasn't there either. I was so genuinely confused, I just leaned against the bathroom doorframe and rubbed my forehead. I didn't know where else she was hiding. I was sick of this stupid charade, so I tried to think of ways I could catch her. Yelling for her didn't work. I put my hand in my jacket pocket and realized something. She hadn't texted me anything else since the bathroom, but hopefully she still had her phone on her. So I sent a text to her, "Come out now." When I pressed send, I waited for a ding in the apartment. I held my breath so I could hear where it would come from. The only thing I could hear was my heartbeat drumming softly in my ears. The apartment was silent. Ding. The sound rang loudly from the room in front of me. Laura was in my room. I waited again for her to move. She stayed where she was. I snapped, "Laura, get your ass out here. I found you." Something stopped me in my tracks. It was that recognizable feeling of being watched. This time it came from in front of me. I stood there in the doorway of my sister's room staring. She was watching me. It was just a question of where she was hiding. Then I saw her. There, in the hinged gap of my door, was a pair of eyes shrouded by darkness. I let out a strangled cry. The eyes squinted and eyebrows raised, with the shadowed lips pulled back into a wide, toothy smile. I found her, all right. Instantly, I slammed her bedroom door shut and leaned against it, shaking with her hockey stick in hand. I stayed there for around 10 minutes, trying to get my breath back. The sound of bare feet on the floorboards went up to the room I was in. I quickly but quietly shuffled away from the door and stood up. The shadows of her feet dotted the gap under the door. We both froze. She was standing so still. So was I. We were both listening for the other to make a sound. Eventually, Laura shifted and began to walk down the hallway to the kitchen and then to the front door. I heard her put on her shoes and grab her keys. The door opened with its distinct squeak, and she shut it gently as I heard the lock click into place. It took me a while before I forced myself to stop cowering in Laura's room and scope out the place for any sign of her. This time, she had truly gone. I tried to calm myself down and focus on what I would say to Laura when she, or if she, came back. Where would I start? What would I say? Thankfully, she came back a while later. I was watching Love Island when I heard the door slam. I swear it rattled the windows. The tenants below gave us a complimentary bang on the floor to tell us to be quiet, which I'm shocked they didn't do earlier. I turned down the TV and leaned back on the sofa. Laura dropped her keys into the bowl by the door and staggered forward into the warm light of the kitchen behind me. I faced backwards and gazed at her. She didn't even look up at me. "Hey, asshole," I called out to her. Laura finally looked up at me with face full of shock. It was like she hadn't realized I was there. "Jesus, Liz," she gasped. "You scared me." I nearly fell back in my seat. I scared her? "Are you serious?" I retorted. "You scared me earlier." She knitted her brows together. "What are you talking about? Don't play with me." "Liz, I have no idea what you're referring to." I stood up and ran my hands through my hair. "The fucking peeking thing you did with me when I walked in this morning." Laura pursed her lips and looked up in thought. Then I saw her eyes light up. "Oh, that thing? Yes, you found me." She beamed at me, drumming her fingers on the kitchen table. "Yeah, eventually." I narrowed my eyes at her. "What the hell was that, Laura?" She let out a quiet giggle. "I wanted to prank you when you got home." "What?" "Yeah," she drummed faster. "Did you like it?" I stood there, speechless. Did I like it? "So I'm taking that as a yes?" Laura was grinning widely at me, fidgety fingers now still on the tabletop. "I thought you were an intruder," my voice rising. "I could have hurt you." She shrugged. "But you didn't." There was a heavy pause. "What the fuck, Laura?" I murmured. She let out an exhausted sigh. It was clear she thought this was all a joke. "Look, I'm sorry if I spooked you." "Spooked me?" I hissed. "You messed me up." She folded her arms. "I'm sorry." "You should be." I sat back down on the sofa arm. "That was fucked." Laura looked like a wounded dog, all big-eyed and sad.
I hated it when she looked at me like that. It was always for show, but every time she put that face on, it plucked at my heartstrings. In this situation, I should have stayed firm in being pissed off with her. However, I was tired of this whole thing and I wanted to cut this dumb pantomime short. "Just don't do that again, okay?" I huffed. Laura kept her pout and nodded at me. I nodded back in agreement and turned back to face my show. I heard her shuffle off back towards the hallway where our rooms were. I offered, "Love Island's on. You want to watch it with me?" She stopped her shambling. "Yeah," I heard her call back. "Can you promise me something though?" I furrowed my brow and called back, "Yeah, what?" There was a hint of silence. "Answer your phone next time." She went back to normal after that. Laura was her back to her regular, happy self. No more pranking. She was Laura again, and that was that. Something was off with her though. Something was. She spoke in her sleep. A quirk she had since she was a child, but sometimes she would speak so loud that I could hear her next door. I would go in to check on her, and she always woke up and looked out to the hallway into the bathroom. Nothing too bizarre, but enough for me to keep an eye on her, more than usual. Anyway, like I mentioned, my Tinder date husband and I continued to see each other. It was clear we were starting to form a real relationship. So as a result, I spent more time with him and less with Laura. She was also spending more time at college because her hockey team made it to a big tournament, so she needed to train multiple days after class. I would pick her up most days. Here's where things start to go downhill, and Laura's strange behavior began to surface once again. She would be bubbly and chatty when her friends were in the car. I would drop them all off at their houses, and then Laura and I would be alone together. Our conversations were perfectly normal. I think that's what set me off so often. I'd ask her how practice went. She'd ask how work was, so on and so forth. The one thing that stayed consistent over all of these trips was Laura staring at me. She always watched me. Even when she looked ahead, I knew she was pretending to. Her eyes were forced into the corners of their sockets as she observed my actions and listened to me speak. I don't know if she knew that I knew, but I often hoped that she didn't. She'd go back to normal in the apartment, and we'd be fine until we went to bed. The nights would be filled with mumbling, gasping, and snoring from Laura. I was used to her sleep-talking by then, so it was rarely an issue, and I would sleep through her ramblings easily. The main issue was the sleepwalking. This was a new habit she had picked up, and it was one neither of us liked. I believed it was down to stress to begin with. Nowadays, I'm not so sure. She would wander out of her room and sit in front of the TV. She would never switch it on and would instead speak to herself. I could hear murmurs, clicks, and even laughs echoing from the living room. One night, I woke up and heard her clicking and mumbling. I peeked my head out the door and saw her sitting pin straight on the sofa. I thought, fuck that, and went straight over to her and woke her up. Yes, I know that's a bad idea, and you should never wake someone up from a sleepwalking episode unless their life is in danger. But it was freaking me out, and I know Laura would be freaked out too if she found out she was out of bed like this. She jolted sharply in her seat and gave me a look of confusion. She asked me where she was before I dragged her to bed and told her goodnight. This carried on for a while. We went to the doctors. They gave us sleeping tablets. They were supposed to keep her from wandering around, which they did. And then the incident happened. I had spent the past week at my husband's house after Laura told me she would be fine and that she promised to take her meds. We also installed a couple of cameras just in case anything happened. Laura texted me a lot. Like, a lot. She would ask me how I was, where I was, what I was doing, whether I was coming home. Just endless prodding. Eventually, I stopped texting back. I would read it and leave it at that. Unless it was serious, I didn't respond and muted her notifications. At the time, I thought that was best for both her, and I had a great time. My husband and I went to the carnival, watched a local college football game, and he cooked me dinner every night. He asked me to be his girlfriend the night before I left, which I told him yes. When I woke up the next morning, I finally decided to unmute Laura. She had sent me around 30 texts and called me a dozen times. I left early before breakfast and raced home. I almost had a panic attack in the car. What if she was hurt? What if she had an accident while sleepwalking? What if someone hurt her? All these thoughts buzzed around in my head until I looked at the texts. Where are you? Are you busy? Talk to me, Liz. It's too quiet in here, Liz. Come home, Liz. Come home. She spammed that last one over and over again. Now, Laura was always a little bit clingy. I was her older sister, and not to blow my own horn, she looked up to me quite a bit. She liked us being together, and sometimes felt a bit sad when I left, but not like this. This was strange for her. It was like she had developed attachment issues overnight. However, I felt more worried than annoyed. If anything, this looked like a cry for help. When I came in, Laura had just came home herself and was busying around in the bathroom. The place smelled like bleach. I found her scrubbing the sink down, pink washing gloves messing with the plug hole. Hey, I knocked on the door gently. She didn't respond and instead continued to clean. Laura? She looked up at the mirror and broke out into a huge grin. Her eyes were bloodshot and her lips were cracked at the edges. Liz, she exclaimed, which caused me to jump. "You're home." "Yeah," I nodded slowly. "You've been feeling okay, bud?" "Never better." She didn't turn around and instead stared at me through the mirror. "Are you sure?" I grimaced. "You texted me a ton when I was out." "Yes, I'm sure." Her smile dropped slightly before quickly coming back to her face. Those eyes never faltered, though. They stayed wide and red. I swear I could feel her fiery pupils burning into my fucking soul. That look was a warning. "Shut up." I gave her a weak smile in return before shutting the door and scrambling to my room. It was like Laura hadn't slept in days. They were so tired and red. She sat close to me on the sofa and followed me wherever I went. She was like my shadow that evening. She never touched me, though. She just stayed quiet and stayed uncomfortably close. Something definitely happened to Laura. I don't know what, but it messed her up. I had to help her. Even if I was terrified of what would happen. I still can't believe it got to the point where I was scared of my own stepsister. It was only until a night later when I couldn't stand it anymore. After a day of trailing behind and watching me, Laura and I were sat in the living room watching something. Some kind of trashy reality show? Anyway, I turned her and I saw her face. She looked so odd. Real uncanny valley shit. It was like her eyes were too far apart. Her nose was too long, and her lips were too thin. All her proportions were wrong. Her skin looked stretched too, like it had been pulled back. Reminded me of a botched facial surgery. Laura's eyes bored straight into mine. They were still weary, but the bright red had calmed to a light pink. Her pupils were huge though, which made sense at the time because of the low lighting. We looked at each other and brought me back to that original peeking prank incident. "You okay?" I asked tentatively, breaking the icy silence. Laura's face broke into a giddy grin, lips less cracked than when I saw her yesterday. It was as if hearing me talk was the best thing that happened to her. Yes, I bit the inside of my mouth. Her voice was so croaky and strained. You would have thought she hadn't spoken in a century. I wanted to probe. I really did. But the way her eyes looked at me, I just didn't feel safe doing it, so I hugged her. I squeezed the life out of her and rubbed her back. "You'd tell me if there was something wrong, right?" Laura stayed quiet and raised a wobbling hand to my back. I didn't feel her breath on my neck, even though her chest was raising softly. Yes, still in that horrible throaty groan. I sighed and pressed a small kiss on her head. "You know I love you, right?" She stopped rubbing my back and held her hand on the back of my neck, fingers wrapped around in a claw. "Always." She rasped. We went to bed late that night. I stayed up watching horror movies with Laura. She seemed so normal when we watched them. Like the old Laura came back. I heard her take her sleeping meds and shove them back in the cabinet. She flushed the toilet and opened the door with a grimace of disgust. I didn't realize they tasted that bad. When she wandered off to her room, I went into the bathroom and closed the door. I opened the cabinet next to the mirror and grabbed her pill bottle. She had been taking her pills, much to my surprise. I kept my door open in case she ever got up. I knew she wouldn't because she took her meds, and she shouldn't have gotten up at all. I snuggled up in bed and went on my phone. My husband texted me, so I texted him back, sending each other sweet messages. In the corner of my eye, I saw a red dot popping on and off. Curiously, I faced the crimson light and sat up in my bed. It was a camera I had set up when I left. I had forgotten about those. They were all connected to my phone, so I could see Laura wandering around when I was gone. There was one in each bedroom, the hallway where the bedrooms and bathroom were, the kitchen, and the living room. God, I had forgotten all of it. I decided to check in the morning with Laura. I thought we'd be better watching it together than behind her back. It was silent that night. Lauren was fast asleep, and so was I. I think it was early morning when I woke up. It was very cold. I was shivering in my bed. That's how cold it was. Scowling, I checked my phone. 3-something o'clock. Suddenly, the feeling of being watched had came back again. The hair on my back and neck raised. A frosty shiver ran down my back like fingernails scratching down my spine. I felt pure dread, utter dread. It hung low and coiled in my stomach, making me feel sick. I had to turn and look. I'd be stupid if I didn't. It could have been Laura sleepwalking, although I wished it wasn't. So I pressed the flashlight icon, which shined brightly. It made me wince, and I tried to adjust to the light. When my eyes tuned themselves to the darkness, I stayed on my right side and shone the flashlight to the wall. The dread just mounted and mounted. It built up so much I nearly threw up simply lying there. At last, I turned onto my left side and flashed the light at my doorway. I barely kept my scream in. It was Laura. She was standing over my bed, her arms raised up above her head, with her hockey stick in her hands. Her bloodied lips were manipulated into a foul snarl. White teeth turned red from the blood. Her body was deathly still, but I could hear her breathing heavily through gritted teeth. The wavy hair she had was askew. Stands wiped over her face, and it fell out of her low ponytail. Her eyes were bright red. It was as if someone had sprayed claret dye into them, staining them an awful color. The pupils were blown wide, almost encompassing the irises. The light was bouncing off them. They were so wet and watery, like someone forced them open against her will. She didn't even blink once. Laura looked like she had been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to, which she actually had. We stayed like that, frozen in fear on both ends. What was she going to do to me? Was she going to beat me to death? I quickly yanked the charger out of my phone and jumped out of bed. She didn't move. She didn't turn to look at me. She didn't do anything. She was a murderous statue. I didn't even care. I grabbed my sliders and sped past her to the front door. I snatched my car keys from the bowl and shoved them into my shorts pocket. I thought I put them in my pocket. Instead, they clattered to the floor with a loud jangle. My heart dropped when I heard a loud grunt echo from my room and the rapid padding of feet. I grabbed the keys and flung open the door, not even bothering to look back. I was almost out into the floor corridor when I felt a sudden sharp pain in my left calf. It was like a big dog had bitten into the muscle and wasn't going to let go. The pain was so strong I looked back and screamed as loud as I could. Laura had ran out the room, dropped the hockey stick, and had plunged her teeth and nails deep into my leg. Blood was blossoming on my calf, and Laura's lower face was covered in the crimson liquid. Her giant pupils were fixated on my face, with streams of tears gushing down her cheeks. I heard some doors starting to unlock, so I snatched the hockey stick next to her and smashed her square in the face. I had never felt that horrible before. My heart ached as I saw her yelp and let go of my leg. People were outside now, some faces filled with concern, others were horrified. Hands stretched out to me, coaxing me to come inside to their places of solitude. I just leapt to my next-door neighbor and they caught me with open arms. I heard her scream after me, begging me to come back. The rest of the night was a blur. I ended up going to the hospital sometime during all this. My husband came as soon as he could and stayed by my bed. Not even the doctors could drag him away. I was exhausted. It was also because of the blood loss, too. I had to have a shit ton of stitches, and I've still got an ugly teeth-shaped scar on my left leg to this day. If you look in the right light, you can see the little indents of Laura's nails when they punctured my skin. The morphine was fantastic, by the way. I see how people get addicted to stuff like it. I never saw Laura again after that. It was like she disappeared. Apparently, as soon as she let go and I ran into my neighbor's place, she practically flew down the stairs and ran off into the night. Police tried all they could. They never found any trace of her. That was it. I failed. My little sister was gone. My only job was to protect her, to be her older sister. I couldn't even do that. My parents were angry at the start, of course. But when they heard what happened, they were distraught. I told them what she did and how bad I felt that I ignored her for so long. My mom apologized to me. She broke down crying with my stepdad comforting her. They were tight-lipped for the whole day. Every time I tried to ask if they knew more than they were letting on, they just shushed me or changed the subject. They knew something. So I cornered my mom in the kitchen a week after the incident and demanded she tell me what happened. I threatened to cut contact. This was harsh, but I had to know if they were hiding things from me. She bawled. I'd never seen her cry so much before. According to Mom, Laura had gone off like this before. When she was younger and I was in college, she would follow people and stare at them. She would hide places and watch people. She would growl and hiss at each of my parents, sometimes clawing at them when they got too close. It was as if she went feral when I left. Then when I came back, she would shift back to her normal, needy self. I walked out. They fucking knew she wasn't right, and they dropped her on me. Looking back, I see why. They should have told me, though. They needed to let me know. Sometime later, I went back to my flat to pick up my stuff with my husband. I was going to move in with him, so I just wanted to grab some stuff before the big move happened. Luckily, Laura was long gone. Still, we stiffly put some clothes in my duffel and called it a day. When I was there, I saw the cameras and realized that they were all still on. I checked them with my husband that night. Laura was chilled out most of the time. It was weird seeing her this way after all that happened. When I left, she wandered around. Sometimes she would walk back and forth in a random pattern, entering one bedroom, then the next she would stand in the hallway and face my room too. She would be wobbling back and forth, mouth wide open and drool dripping from her hanging tongue. It would go on for a couple of minutes at a time, and sometimes even hours. No wonder her lips were cracked. She never blinked either. This was clearly because of this statue routine. It was sickening seeing her eyes go from a tired pink to a vivid red over that period of time. Her second favorite place would be her room. She would sit on the floor facing her closet door, whispering indistinct nothings to the empty wardrobe. There were times she would let out cut-off giggles and hisses in between the mumbles. The thing I hated the most was when she sat in front of the cameras and stared into the lens. Her eyes were watery and tears fell in rivers. One time she pressed her eye up to the lens and stayed like that for an hour. It was like she was trying to spot me through the kitchen camera. My husband shivered next to me and held me closer as I fast-forwarded the footage. I also found out she wasn't taking her sleeping pills. Laura would leave the bathroom door ajar, and I could see her open the cabinet. She would take 2 out and stand in front of the toilet. I saw her throw them into the bowl before flushing it. So that's how she was still up that night. Then the evening before I was going to come home, Laura did something that made me gag. She had sprinted to the bathroom, clutching her mouth and stomach. She bust open the door and crouched over the sink, her back popping and shuddering as she heaved. After she was done, I saw her put her hand up to her mouth. She leaned against the sink and shoved her hand down her throat and began to pull on something. Her wet eyes rolled back and her shoulders rocked violently. Then she lifted her hand from her mouth and pulled out what was lurking in her throat. I zoomed in and my husband covered his mouth. She pulled out a long, thick string of black hair covered in saliva and mucus. It was so soggy and it wrapped around her fingers, clinging to her nails like thin tendons. My sister was blonde, so how the hell did that hair get in her throat? Lavra flung the nasty ebony hair behind her into the sink. She spun around and I heard her turn on the tap. The water spilled over the edge and dripped onto the floor. She switched it off almost a minute later, delayed in her actions. Stillness returned for a moment before she grew angry. Lavra let out a loud, ear-piercing screech of agony and fell to the floor, banging her fists against the white tiles. She clawed at the ceramic and howled in despair, calling after me in a desperate wail. It was disturbing to see her this undone, to see her this furious. She begged and prayed for me to come home, the cries only getting louder and louder until she faced the camera I was watching her from. I jumped back in my seat at the sudden change, and I recoiled even further when she crawled on her hands and knees towards us. I saw Laura's bloody hand reach up and grab the bedroom camera, pulling it close towards her face. Her mouth was twisted into a large, canine-filled snarl. She stared straight at us, eyes narrowed on us like a shark going for the kill. She spoke in a tone so sharp and threatening, it could have cut through silence. "Why did you leave me, Liz? You leave your family for a worthless man." She spat, venom laced in every word. "I'll kill him for you." Those freakishly large pupils swelled in her eyes. "I won't let him take you away from me." We sent everything to the police, and they continued their search for her. They never found anything. I ended up spending the next few years of my life fearing her reappearance. I don't like to say fear, but that's the best way I could describe that feeling. Who knows what she would be like after being separated from me for that long? That wretched thought hid in the corner of my brain for years. Yesterday, it all changed. I was reading in bed at home with my husband by my side when I got the call. The police found her. They actually found her. She was crouched outside my old apartment, pale and thin. They couldn't believe it. After all this time, she was back. She was placed into the local hospital for malnutrition and injuries sustained to her face and body. I called my mom and stepfather as soon as I was able to. They acted as if they cared, that they were glad, but I saw through that facade like a glass house. They weren't happy. They were fucking petrified. I saw the picture of her. He was dressed in a white medical gown and had her frail arms laid down her sides. Her head was resting on the pillow, crusty eyes shut. Scratches littered her face, some formed as pink scars. Her pale, ripped lips were split open. She looked so fragile, yet so peaceful. Much different from the girl I tussled with years ago. I cried. I cried until my throat was sore and my eyes went dry. She literally took a chunk out of my leg and tried to kill me. Why did I feel so relieved? I think it's because I know deep down that she needs help. Back then, that was a young girl who needed help. Help I wasn't able to give, but others can. I'm meeting her tomorrow. Obviously, I'm heading there with my husband. God forbid I go alone. I don't know what she'll do. The only thing I keep hearing from the police is her one droning request. She keeps saying, "Need Liz, come home." I almost don't want to see her, but I know I must. I still love her after all that. Even with all the shit she put me through, I have a feeling she's had it worse. Laura's my baby sister, and it's my job to look after her. I'm also probably the only family member who cares about her. I do. I always will. If Laura needs me, I'll be there. I just hope she goes back to being her again. I have to.